Item 9D1, Encore Park Developers Agreement. We'll have to look at that later.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, minutes, see any corrections to the minutes? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve minutes.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes from the February 3rd briefing and the February 7th regular meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we have the claims on page 17 through 19. Any questions on the claims?
Motion to approve.
Second. We have a motion and a second to approve the claims. Any further questions? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Nothing on the consent calendar, Brian? Okay. This is going to be the time for our public comments. We've asked our city attorney to address this issue for us at this particular time.
I was asked to just remind everybody here that this is the time and place for public comments. On any matter, you're limited to the 5 minutes. Please state your name and address into the microphone that needs to be turned on. As to item 7B3, the conditional use permit appeal, the dog kennel, I just want to take this opportunity to remind everybody that is here that our ordinance specifies that no new evidence or testimony shall be presented during the council's consideration of that appeal. When we get to that item, we will not be receiving new evidence or testimony. The decision of the council needs to be based on what was presented to the planning and zoning. You will be allowed to speak as to why what was presented at planning and zoning does not or does support the CUP that was issued, but no new testimony or evidence will be allowed to be presented to the council regarding that issue. So anybody who wants to use their 5 minutes to speak on some public issue, you certainly can at this time, but if you are speaking to that kennel issue, the council cannot consider any new testimony or evidence, even if it's presented during this public input portion of the meeting.
Yeah, just some clarification. So, no new evidence can be presented, especially now. The public input time here. But later on, I understand they can't present new evidence, but evidence that they presented prior to the planning and zoning can be.
Somebody could come back up and say, this is what was presented at planning and zoning. I think the council has had the opportunity to listen to the hearing and review the documents. So while they certainly could say this is what was presented, I don't know that it's necessarily needed because you've been able to listen and review that, but the public certainly has the ability during that portion to talk about what was presented then, just not offer anything new.
Well, I'm not sure I've been able to listen to all of it, but I can see a possibility that I want to hear what they have to say.
Right, but you can't consider something that wasn't presented. So if somebody,
I understand.
right, so if somebody wants to come in and say at the planning and zoning, I talked about, or, Sarah talked about, or Aaron talked about and said this, that can be done during the appeal. They just can't bring up anything that was not presented, any new issues, any new
How are we
argument.
going to police that?
Barb has asked me, I've listened to it, I have notes, and if something is new, Barb had asked me to interject and interrupt if something's new and shouldn't be considered, so you make sure your appeal record is proper and you're not considering something new.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, I should say Councilmember Fish or President Fish instead of Barb, so my apology.
Yeah, I stand on ceremony quite often. Also, Tim was at the meeting, I was at the meeting, I've listened to the recording, Dan has listened to the recording, so I think we'll be able to handle that. Okay, so based on that, does anyone here have any public comment for something else going on in the city?
Chuck Parsons, 600 North Yellowstone. I'm here on behalf of the Brandon Development Foundation. I think on your agenda tonight, D3, you're going to consider a recommendation from our committee for a new development director. I would ask for your support. We had a very good candidate, very pleased with this person, so I would ask for your support. Thank you.
Thanks, Chuck. Anybody else for public comment? All right, if not, we're going to move into public hearing for the malt beverage and South Dakota wine liquor license for the upper room. Do we just need, anybody have any comments on that, questions?
I would move to approve.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the malt beverage license for the upper room, which is in the back area of Pizza Ranch. All in,
Planning and zoning approved the conditional use permit.
planning and zoning approved, yes. Okay, anything else?
Any conditions we'll put on there?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Okay. And then we have to consider under public hearing the transfer of a malt beverage and South Dakota wine, farm wine liquor license from Joker's Casino to the Dakota Star Casino. My understanding, it's just a transfer between ownership kind of thing.
Correct, and planning and zoning approved the conditional use permit as well.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second to approve the transfer of the license. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. All right, now we're moving on to the appeal of the conditional use permit for a commercial kennel. So,
The council is to consider the evidence and testimony that was presented to planning and zoning. Presented to planning and zoning was testimony about concerns for property value decreases, noise, smell, odor, tenants leaving neighboring buildings and businesses not coming to the area, the closing of counseling services, the difficulty in getting counselors to Brandon, and the harm that could occur to those clients due to barking noise. At planning and zoning, there was also presented testimony about the police process for barking and that there were no known complaints from the vet clinics as to barking noise at night, and that those facilities that are already in Brandon have outdoor spaces for dogs to use as well. At planning and zoning, the applicant spoke about the plans to address odors, barking, staffing, her living nearby, cameras, and the location being by a busy intersection already, fencing, the need for her business in this community by her opinion, and the plans for veterinary care. The planning and zoning did put conditions in that require compliance regarding animals being outside, they must be attended, waste being cleaned up immediately, fencing, no breeding or sales, and contact information by the owner being provided to the Brandon Police. As I stated, since the council had this evidence, there's really no need for the council to hear the restated evidence that was presented, but as stated, you certainly can come up and talk about what the evidence was that was presented, and speak to why that which was presented at planning and zoning does or does not support the CUP that was issued. But the council is not to hear any new evidence or testimony. So, and then at the completion of, if the council wants to hear anything, the ordinance does say that the council reviews a planning and zoning decision. You can affirm it by a majority vote, or upon 2/3 of vote, you reverse it or vacate it back to the Planning and Zoning Commission. You can send it back to the Planning and Zoning Commission with or without direction. So to affirm has to be majority of the council. To remand for the Planning and Zoning to consider something else, or vacate, you have to have 2/3 of the quorum that's here tonight.
all right, so we can invite public comment on what was presented to planning and zoning if anyone so wishes. Come on.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood. Did you just invite public comment now?
in regards to what was stated at planning and zoning. Then if you'd push that little button, sir, so the mic comes on. There you go,
Is it
and
on
state
now?
your name and address,
Okay.
please.
My name is Dan Plute, and I live at 1012 East Aspen Boulevard. Now, I was here and testified to planning and zoning, and I talked about odors, talked about noise, I talked about property values. And I think that planning and zoning, if they made a mistake, they made a mistake. They did not consider the impact on neighbors and property values enough. The other things appear to be taken care of by the conditions that were put on the passage of that planning and zoning. I hope it works. I hope that those conditions are not relaxed down the road. What I wanted to talk about a little bit was the property values in the area. They kind of take a double kick in the rear. The attractiveness of it due to the location and everything else, and you know, if it's less attractive, or if people don't want to live by a kennel, they're not going to look at something that's for sale beside it. The price, if you find somebody that's interested, the price is probably going to be lower, considerably lower than it would have been if the kennel had not been there. If I were buying a home in Brandon, I wouldn't look at a home that I live in now, not at that location. I have nothing against dogs, nothing against kennels. I just don't think they belong in the city beside residences or across the street from them, 90 feet from my front door. I'm 74 years old, and we worked hard to pay our house off. And one of the things we're planning on is if something happens to one of us, the other one has that house to drop back on. And if they sell it, they can maybe find a place, it'll help them get into an assisted living situation or something, or maybe independent living, whatever. But it's available. And it's really hard to accept the fact that that value that we've paid for is going to be dropping. And it is. Does anybody on the council, would they want this house beside them, or this kennel, or this business? Would they want it beside their house? Would they want it close enough to talk to people in the yard over there? You know, is the county or even the city willing to drop the taxes a little bit because of the devaluation of our land or our property? A number of months ago, they did away with the 1,000-foot requirement for business such as this to be near a residence. At the time that was done, was this already in the works? Was it being planned? And if it was, why was it kept a secret? If it wasn't, I apologize for making that remark. But something brought that up. Dog kennels have a place, they provide a good service, but I don't think they have a place in town. It shouldn't be impacting citizens that live in this town the way that this does. I could go on, and I'm not going to have 5 minutes, and that's where I'm going to cut it off. I'm going to throw something at you, and I apologize if it doesn't fit, but it was not presented because it happened afterwards. After the meeting with planning and zoning, one of the planning and zoning members came up to...
So if it
Sorry.
wasn't presented, it can't be considered?
Yeah.
I
So-
can't, okay.
right.
Sorry, yeah. But I appreciate you were here last time, appreciate your comments. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming again.
Okay.
Appreciate that. All right, anyone else that wants to address what was said at the planning and zoning meeting and the testimony that was presented at that time? I'm sorry that this is such a structured thing, but this is the way the rules are. And so we have to follow the rules when there's an appeal. Anybody else? Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Susie Meyer, and I live at 705 South 8th Avenue, and I'm the one that is opening this kennel, and I live literally one building away from the kennel, so I live within the neighborhood, and I do not want the same things that you've heard from the neighbors. I don't want that either in my neighborhood. So the conditions that have been put upon me, I had those already built into my plan. So as it was read earlier, I had 6 conditions, and I am meeting all of them already. And I'm very aware of my neighbors around me, and I will always hold that high. And that's how I want to run my business.
Thank you, Susie.
Real quick, what was your address? You want to ask them?
705 South 8th, and this building is 704 South 8th.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Oh, okay.
Hi, I'm Jeremy Sanford, and I own 700 South 8th Avenue. Excuse me. So I assume you all had a chance to do what you need to do in terms of due diligence with educating yourself on that, and I appreciate that. But I just want to kind of present for the record that I'm here. This is a big deal to me. I agree that I like dogs. I own a dog. I'm all for that. I just think this is a poorly planned, poor idea. And as a small business owner, it pains me to have to be here and do this. And but I have responsibility to the people who rent from me and to the counseling practice who really has an obligation to their clientele to be cognizant of what's going on in the environment. So anyway, so that's I just
Yeah,
want to share.
thank you. You were here last time too, so we appreciate your interest and concern. And I failed to mention that Dana Clark was also at our meeting, so several of us have heard some of these comments. So anybody else? All right.
Lisa, would the members of the P&Z that are here, would they be able to come up and speak to this, or they've already said their piece?
They certainly can state why they believe the evidence supports their decision if they want to.
Could you clarify that? Is that new evidence? To me, it sounds like.
No, they're explaining what their decision was based upon. They can't bring up new evidence, but they can say, as any other Brandon resident, that the evidence that was presented supports their decision in the following regards, just as was stated by a member of the public here, that they did not believe the planning and zoning considered the impact on property values. So it's the same thing of them coming in and saying, this is why the decision they believe is supported. Not presenting new evidence, it's presenting an argument.
Never been on this side. All right. Brian Heidbrink, 409 South Dakota Avenue, Brandon, South Dakota. I am a member of Planning and Zoning. I can't speak for the other members, but I can speak for myself. Some of the information that we acknowledged was the noise, the odors that were brought up by some of the testimony. When I considered this, in my mind, this is very similar to some other businesses that are currently in Brandon. And when I speak to that, that's veterinary clinics. And so the animals are kept inside. This is not an outdoor kennel. And that's part of our ordinance, is that when we change the ordinance, that it's not to be an outdoor type of kennel. Dogs are to be allowed outside to exercise, but not to be housed outside unaccounted for. And those were some of the conditions that the applicant put on themselves and that we reiterated in our approval of the conditional use. So as I mentioned, when I considered this, I considered very similar businesses in Brandon, and that is things like Verizon Pet Care, where they house animals inside overnight. And we had asked city administration if they had heard of any any reports of noise or issues associated with that, and they were not aware of any. And so I considered this to be a business very similar to that application. Did not have any issues with noise, with odors, or any other types of complaints. And so felt it was an appropriate application for a business occupancy. So, thank you.
Thank you, Brad.
Are we allowed to ask questions?
John?
I'd like to ask a question.
His testimony should really be on why he thinks it's supported and what was talked about there, just as any other citizen, but go ahead.
Well, my question concerns how you consider Verizon, which is not Ford, and Parks and Rec as similar or same type of business.
They do keep animals overnight.
Keep them overnight for veterinary services, not Ford.
Right, but they're still kept overnight inside of a facility, which is very similar to what we're talking about here. They're kept overnight indoors, not outdoors. The only time that they would be outdoors, the applicant has indicated that they would be accompanied. So I personally felt this is a better application than a homeowner who leaves their pets outside during the day when they're at work, leaves them outside at night, which would be a worse situation than where they take their animals outside to let them exercise and relieve themselves. And if they do bark, they acknowledge they were going to bring them back indoors so that the noise would not be an issue. So,
I guess my concern here is the fact that it was the two businesses were compared and they're not alike. And so I'm trying to understand where P&Z came to that conclusion. And we may just have to respectfully disagree on that. But and switching gears here slightly, but shared that when I listened to some of the tapes, there was some discussion about changing the ordinance from 1,000 feet down to 500 to 50. And then it never seemed to be followed up on in the meetings. Clarification there, maybe, to be helpful.
Direction from the commission was to just do it as a conditional use without a distance restriction. And that's what was drafted and presented.
Okay, I was kind of assuming that that's the way it went, but it's never really, from what I could hear on the audio, that it never really made clear that was going to be the case. But,
I have a quick question. So Brian, with the conditional use permit, that's something that like a sign is posted outside that address, like one that I now see there, but I didn't prior to the P&Z meeting.
correct.
Okay, so it wasn't presented prior to the P&Z meeting?
It was there. It was.
It was. Okay.
Any further, ma'am? Come on forward.
I have a question about,
Give us your name
oh,
and address.
Erin Sanford. We just moved to Sioux Falls, so 6604 East Steamboat Trail in Sioux Falls. I also own and operate the counseling practice next door. Regarding a conditional use permit, if the use in the building changes from that was discussed at the conditional usage hearing, is there then a new conditional use? Say, I don't know, if it becomes a doggy car wash or a doggy boarding daycare. So changing from, it was just originally a boarding facility to then a dog wash and a doggy daycare. Do they have to have a new conditional hearing to add those types of services?
Right, so they're given a conditional use here to operate a dog kennel. If they want to come in and serve alcohol, if they want to come in and do something that was not part of what they were granted, they would have to come in and get a conditional use for that.
So how do we enforce that?
Like other zoning violations are enforced, you report it to the city, and then they go out and investigate it. And in the event that there's a violation, the city has a process by which they get the owner in compliance or shut them down.
Okay. So what happened, I presented this at the original meeting that I was at as well, is that I become then, as the neighbor and the neighbors next door, then become mini law enforcement agents trying to do our jobs to serve the community. According to the website, what was addressed at the original conditional usage has already changed, and that's extremely frustrating. Also, the wooden fence that was part of the condition is not a solid wooden fence yet. That was testified here that it's already done, is not done.
If something is not in compliance, you need to notify the city administrator, the zoning code enforcement officer, to look into that, to see if they're violating it.
Okay. And I'm just here to also reiterate just how difficult this is for a person who has owned and operated a counseling practice in this city for many years, who set up a counseling practice in a quiet, almost residential neighborhood in an effort to provide a space that's safe and quiet for my patients and other therapists. I didn't feel like the planning and zoning considered the fact that we have a business that was established under certain conditions in a certain area of town that was zoned a certain way, that now is changed to now include this as a possibility, which was not there when I originally purchased the property. So I just wanted to reiterate that to the council to consider today. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sarah Schaffner. My address is 112 West River Court. And I just wanted to express that at the planning and zoning meeting, I felt like it wasn't discussed much in terms of when the 1,000 feet rule was adjusted, that my office is literally 20 feet from where this business will be. And I just feel like, considering that it is a mental health center, that should be something considered, that is such a drastic change.
Anyone else to address what was stated at the PNC? So, we have the appeal in front of us, and our options are to affirm the repeal, to deny the appeal, or to remand it back to P&Z. Is that correct, Lisa?
Well, you'd be affirming the decision of planning and zoning.
Yeah, I said that backwards.
Or remanding back to P&Z without directions, or reversing the decision, thereby granting the appeal. So.
Just out of a process, let's say, if this appeal is granted, what happens next?
Well, if you grant the appeal, meaning you decide to not allow the conditional use permit, then the business can't operate. The business owner could appeal that to circuit court. If you affirm and have the decision standing, again, that could also be appealed to circuit court if someone chose to do that. The third option then is to remand it back to planning and zoning for them to consider new testimony, new evidence, give them direction of if you think they didn't consider, and I'm not trying to be flippant, but if you thought they should consider paint color and that was something that was not discussed, you have the ability to say, we think planning and zoning should look at this again and consider these types of things. They didn't look at paint color, whatever the condition is that you think or that they did not consider and they should have considered, for them to then hold it another meeting and discuss it.
So I'm going to make a motion so we can discuss this. I'm going to make a motion that we grant the appeal.
So granting the appeal means that you're reversing the decision. Okay.
So I'm going to piggyback on what Jack was talking a little bit, with part of the decision being based on the comparison with Horizon. I really have a problem with that because Horizon does not board dogs overnight. They don't. It doesn't matter if it's medical or not. I've asked multiple times, including somebody with the last name of Rogan. That wasn't a fair piece of information to make the decision off of. I also struggle with the 1,000-foot change. I know that came through council, but when that recommendation was made during one of the P&Z meetings, I was very much under the impression that it was to provide some liberties. The suggestion actually came from our city administrator to be able to do it case by case, and there was an example, something to the effect of, so you can say, nope, that needs to be 500, or nope, that needs to be 1,000. But I was never led to believe it was going to be 0. And there was a lot of discussion on 1,000, 500, 250. There was even a draft at one of the P&Z meetings for it to be 250. And it kind of just, all conversation about distance fell off. There was conversations about the conditions and questions and answers back and forth and concerns, but that piece never got addressed. I think it's a very important piece. I think most communities have a distance in there for a reason. I think that's the safeguard for the neighbors and for the businesses and for the communities. I don't think we're doing justice for the neighborhood to say 20 feet next to a counselor is right. I think it's setting a very strong precedent that 20 feet is going to be okay for it to be next to a doctor or a spa or a chiropractor or another residential neighborhood. I just don't think it's the right location. I love dogs to death. I think it's a great business, but I don't think that we've made the right decision here. And I was there for that question about, has the PD had any complaints? The one vet clinic that does some boarding is out in Redwood, and that's industrial. And there was a comment made after the answer was no. There was a comment made, well, it's the same thing. Animals are kept inside at night. But the concerns that were voiced at that P&Z meeting were not about night. They were about being able to have daytime conversations with people that are grieving or in PTSD, or children next door having speech services that are autistic or have Down syndrome. So I don't think it's the same thing. I think there were some things that weren't discussed far enough. There was a comment by the chair of P&Z that said, I believe this is a quote, "We as a board, one of our jobs is to make sure we look after and try to protect people's property values."
We do.
Further, he stated, certainly as well as we're discussing what kinds of conditions we'd like to see, whether it should be allowed. And then there was reference to this being the first occurrence. I definitely did not hear consensus from the P&Z committee that everybody was content that no property values were going to be affected. I do fear that some property values would be affected. How much, I don't know. I don't know how we could possibly know that, but I feel that it's a worthy concern. I'll stop
I just
there.
want to clarify something, because I did misstate one thing. If the council doesn't make a motion, you don't have to make a motion to affirm. If you don't reverse, modify, or vacate by 2/3, then the decision stands, and it can be appealed. So I misspoke when I said that.
And when you say 2/3, that would be how many?
4 of you would have to you would have to vote on the motion to reverse, modify, or vacate the decision.
Because Jim is here.
Jim doesn't vote, he's not a council member.
He's not, okay.
It's 2/3, so it's 4.
Other discussion for the council members.
The statute says the city council upon 2/3 vote of the members, not, doesn't say of those who's there, 2/3 of the members. You're all members. So your 2/3 of members is 4.
Okay, we've got a motion on the floor. What's the discussion here?
I would agree. I know this came before council, but it was, to me, I feel like it was presented in a way where, you know, we have a few that may be looking to put kennels up. And of course, I mean, if you look in Brandon, a lot of people have dogs, right? And so I think as a council, we're like, okay, but my impression was more like industrial or whatever. And I guess I have maybe a little bit too much faith in our administration and people to kind of help us guide us the right decision. Because after this came about, I found out Sioux Falls, Harrisburg, they all have a minimum, at least 500, if not 1,000 feet, which I will take fault in that. I probably should never went along with changing the ordinance to begin with, because I see why they put that in place, because Susie, I think this is a wonderful business. Honestly, I have 2 dogs at home. I don't agree with the location. The location to me, I would love this in Brandon. Where it's located, I just can't support.
I guess I would ask a question. Do we currently have an ordinance that residents have to accompany a pet outside? Because she has to operate that way. You can let your dog out and it can bark all day long.
I think we're comparing different things.
Not really. Because she has to monitor her pets being outside. Also, when it comes to property value,
She's making a profit on, Tim.
this council denied multifamily housing a few months ago because they thought it was going to affect property value. There is absolutely no reason for that to happen, because there's evidence that that doesn't affect property value. So I am going to trust P&Z that they know what they're doing, and I'm going to agree with them.
Another item I'll just point out, and Tim, this is, I'm quoting you tonight. You'd stated at the first P&Z meeting that discussed this topic, in general business, we like those to not be loud. We reserve those for things like retail. When this first came to P&Z, it was literally on the first 2 meetings as commercial kennels, currently allowed in GB, should we consider allowing in industrial?
Yep.
So the discussion was, and you even said, this should be in HI and LI. Seems like that's where it should be. How did we miss that?
It should be, and we changed it, so it is.
So we're going from, it was in general business with a 1,000-foot requirement to it should be in industrial, heavy or light,
No, it should also.
to now 0 distance requirement and GB is fine.
When it comes to light and heavy industrial zoning, those are the zoning that allow for the most things. So the statement is it also should be allowed in those. There's no reason it shouldn't be allowed in LI and HI. Not that's only where it should be. There's no reason it shouldn't be allowed in there. I mean, you can operate any business out of a heavy industrial site, essentially.
Any other questions?
So I guess I still have a problem where the ordinance ended up at 0, because it cannot,
Well, it's not 0.
well, there is no.
It's not 0 because
footage requirement.
no, there's a conditional use requirement. The conditional use can require any distance that the planning and zoning wants to put on it.
Okay, but
It's not 0.
you did not, but the P and Z did not put a distance.
Well, they didn't feel it necessary.
And you think it was okay to be 20 foot from a,
I don't know if we have evidence
business?
that it's 20 feet, so I should stop saying.
Yeah, they didn't put a distance on it, so that's not a condition they put on it.
Take your mic off. My challenge here is that we have appointed a P&Z commission to do this work for us. It's very technical work. As Dana knows, Tim knows, we've sat at those meetings. And to come in and second guess them, I struggle with that. Several of them are here at the meeting tonight. That's above and beyond the call of duty. These are volunteers, but they're very knowledgeable volunteers. And I can't sit up here and say that I know more about zoning than they do. And so I think if we're going to keep the system going, we got to practice what we preach. And I think they worked through all of the conditions, and this business has a lot of conditions on it, the most that I'm aware of. So, are there other comments, or we're going to take a vote? Because we got other business to do.
I'll just comment and explain my upcoming vote here. I'll just make a couple comments and explain my vote here. Initially, I was all for this type of business. I use kennels myself quite a bit, and having one local and just down the street would have been awesome. But when listening to the evidence, I cannot, in my own mind, vote to say that this should be allowed at this location, even with the conditional uses. I think you're going to have a tough time adhering to those. If you adhere to the letter of the uses, I think it's going to be tough for you. I wish you luck. But having this at a location where it is, if it isn't 20 feet, it's very close. I know that building area quite well. It is very close. I didn't measure it myself, but I know that I wouldn't call it more than 25 just by looking at it. But to me, P&Z, who I think do a great job, I think that's one thing that was missed. It's just how close and how to another business and how it would affect other businesses, possibly at other locations in the town. So I will be voting to deny the appeal. Excuse me. Accept the appeal. Yes.
Okay, let's restate the motion. Do you have it, Christina?
Lisa can correct me wrong, but the motion on the table is to reverse P&Z's decision.
Right. So
Ms. Clark said to grant the appeal, but what your ordinance says is may modify, reverse, or vacate, so, or remand to consider additional evidence. So really, the motion should be to reverse the planning and zoning's decision, or vacate the planning and zoning decision. Either is fine in that form. So I would say to reverse the planning and zoning commission would be the motion, if that's acceptable, Ms. Clark.
that's acceptable, and who made the second? Vicky, that's okay? All right. So let's do, I would think that this is a roll call.
Clark?
Aye.
David?
Aye.
Fish?
No.
Jorgensen? No. Parliament? Motion fails.
So the situation now is that the conditional use stands unless,
Unless somebody makes a different motion. I mean, the only other motion you could make would be to remand with directions to consider some new evidence, but that would be the only other motion that could be made.
Okay, I would like to make that motion to remand it back to P and Z and, can my motion, Lisa, I'll cut it off there. Can my motion, give them direction?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
The fifth phase of the motion would be to remand it back to P and Z with direction to consider adding a footage requirement to the conditions.
okay, second. Any discussion on that?
So Jack, are you talking about, so like when the dogs are outside? Obviously, because you can't move the building. So is that, I mean, is that what you're thinking with the footage, or?
Well, I know how noisy kennels can be on the inside too. And I believe it is a brick building. No, it is a wood building. Okay. I don't know, I guess I'm not gonna say what my requirement would be. I think it should be discussed at P and Z and hopefully come to some sort of a logical compromise, let's say. And come back to us with, let's just say a better plan for that.
So your motion is to remand it back to P and Z for further discussion?
For further discussion, with a emphasis on a distance requirement.
Okay.
Can I piggyback for a possible amendment to that? I guess I'd like to also better understand the compliance piece of it, because we talked a little bit at our last council meeting, and I believe it was mentioned that P&Z could put something on there like Brian had mentioned, X number of complaints within a certain time frame would revoke a conditional use permit. And then Tim pointed out that when a conditional use permit is out of compliance, then they're out of compliance, which indicates it's revoked. I'm really unclear at what point, or maybe it could just get answered now, at what point that happens. And I think some residents are confused at when that happens too.
Well, if that was a amendment.
We have to have do we have a second?
I think I second it. Has to be approved by whoever.
I thought there has to be a second first and then the amendment.
Correct, there's a second on the amendment, there's a vote on the amendment, and then there's a vote on the original motion.
Well, can we just discuss it for a second? Maybe it doesn't need to be an amendment. Can you just explain to me what that, because Brian, you had mentioned that P&Z can say X number of complaints within a certain time frame would revoke a conditional use permit.
Correct, they
Well,
could
I
have
want to make
placed,
sure valid complaints. I mean, not just a call in and complaining. They'd have to be founded complaints that we're talking about.
So that's something P&Z would hash out what that is?
they could have placed that as a condition of it. On page 49, there's a process for permit revocation. Conditional use permit may be revoked only for cause consisting of failure to maintain the standards required for the initial conditional use permit. So those 6 conditions. A notice of intent to revoke a conditional use permit shall be given in writing 30 days prior to actual revocation. It shall specify the area or areas of continued failure to meet requirements and maintain conditions the city may have imposed. If during that period proof of compliance is made by the holder of the conditional use permit, the conditional use permit shall be continued in force. If a hearing has been requested following receipt of notice of intent to revoke, the Planning and Zoning Commission shall hold a public hearing on the matter and make a final determination on the revocation.
Can you done that now with an example?
If there's complaints received, we give the owner notice that the permit will be revoked. They've got 30 days to offer evidence that they are in compliance, and if at the end of that 30 days, then it would go to the Planning and Zoning Commission for final revocation, or final action, I should say.
Okay, we've got a motion on the floor to remand it back to P and Z. We've got a second. Is there any more discussion? So,
Well, with P and Z to consider adding a footage requirement, I mean, that's the motion.
so is this one that has to be a 2/3 also? Okay. All right. Let's do a roll call vote then unless someone else has something to say.
Dana?
Aye.
David?
Aye.
Fish?
No.
Jorgensen?
No.
Parliament?
Aye.
Motion fails.
The final step in this is the conditional use was upheld. For folks that are concerned about that decision, it can be appealed.
It can be appealed to circuit court under SDCL 11-425 as set forth in our ordinance, and yes, it can, and there's a timing requirement. So they would need to look that up. I think it might be 30 days, but I don't have that in front of me.
Okay, we're moving on to review the streetlight.
I have a question. Brian, when can we change that ordinance? Can we change it? Back to like 500 feet or 1,000 feet?
Process for amending zoning, there's a recommendation from Planning and Zoning Commission first. Typically, to amend a zoning code takes 45 to 60 days with publication. Yep, they have the first step. Sure.
All right, now you need to push the button in on the side.
Put reverse. Hi, I'm Bonnie Lean. This is my husband, David Lean. We live at 1800 South Split Rock Boulevard. We're the last resident on the east side of the highway in the city of Brandon.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I'm David, so we're at 1800 South Split Rock now, but when we moved out there in 1975, we purchased the place. We were considered as Rural Route 1, and then 1976, we called Sioux Valley Electric, and they put in I call it a yard light. My wife calls it a security light, because I steal from the farm in 1961. It's a yard light. But anyway, so be that. So anyway, I'm just going to stick what's going on here. And we've been paying Sioux Valley Energy for that light since 1976. So I've been kind of sticking around or mind my own business, not getting too involved into anything. But then in January 10th of this year, we got a letter from the city that tells us that we owe them for a street light and storm sewer drainage. Well, that kind of shocked me, because 99% of our water runs across our yard, the driveway, by the trees, and down to our son's house at 1702 North Split Rock Boulevard, and then follows the ditch down to a drainage tile that goes all the way down to the Split Rock Creek. I can't figure out where I pay for water fees and for water drainage when it all stays 90% on the east side of Split Rock Boulevard, or whatever you want to call it. When they redid that a few years ago, I think you can see our pine trees there. There's 3 small ones there. There's a little ravine there that goes down to the big pine trees, and all the water runs that way and then goes down to the kids' driveway and then north. Last year we had a bad plugged up driveway with the kids' house there. Water backed up to our pine trees and they stood in water for about 2 weeks. My wife called the city and asked them to do something about that drain to open up the driveway. Well, that's not our responsibility, that's the state's. So now we've got the state on one side and the city on the other. But I think to make it short, we're just going to take and stick with that. But on the 10th, when we got this letter, my wife called down here to Christina about why we have to pay for something that we don't have or do. Which water are you talking about? You're talking about water runoff? You're talking about other water or what? But if 90% or more of ours is running to the north and down to Split Rock, I don't know why we should have to pay for something that doesn't go there.
We don't have any city services
And we don't
out
have
there.
city services out
We-
there, never
We never
have.
have, and we were told that we would never get city services out there because we're on the east side of the highway.
And Aspen was, everything south of Aspen was annexed into the city in about 1971 or 72. And then we took up a petition some years later about bringing city water and sewer out there. Well, the mayor and them back then said there wasn't enough money out in that area, we're not going to develop it out there. And that's what happened, and well, we're still there. We're about one of the last older people out there.
Yeah.
Everybody else has moved on or passed away, but we kind of want this resolved. I don't want to be paid a bill to Sioux Valley Energy and then to the city. You know, it doesn't make sense to me.
Well, if the city wants to put a street light out there, I would rather pay $5 a month than what we're paying now. We're paying $13.70 a month.
The light that we have is about 100 feet or more off the highway. And it lights up our front yard and it lights up the backyard. And that's where we're at. So where do we go? What do we do? Don't pay anybody? I don't know.
Yeah.
But I didn't bring this up there. I only had one sheet of paper, so I couldn't try to make it short.
Would you have a proposal that you'd like to make to the city?
Well, I'd like to know what side of the fence we're on. You know, are we gonna have to pay for a city street light that we don't have?
And then our own security light.
And then pay our security light 100 and some feet off the highway?
Because I talked to Sioux Valley
know,
Energy, and they
and-
own our light.
Yeah.
At first, someone made the remark that they thought the city owned those lights out there, but they don't. Sioux Valley Energy does.
And the closest one that you can actually call a street light out in our area is, I'm just guessing now, I'd say it's gonna be, about 150 yards to the north, maybe 200.
Yeah, I do have a question. I don't know if it's Tammy or Brian, because I drove out that way at nighttime, and if if they are a part of the city, it stops, I think, at what, South Fifth Avenue at the last light we have. But if there is that all row of those houses, why don't we? I mean, I understand with this street lights or the city lights, it kind of goes whether you have one out front of your house or not. You're just kind of paying for everything. But that stretch really has nothing. And if they are part of the city, why have we never put streetlights out there? I'm just curious.
I can't answer for the 70s, 80s, 90s, and early 2000s because I wasn't here, but since I've been here, nobody's requested any.
Do you guys know what I'm talking about? Like at night, like we were driving back and I'm like, you know, after Thursday night, after we had this meeting, I'm like, yeah, if all these houses are in city, annexed in the city, there really is no light, and I know there's a lot of times deer run across there, and they
Yeah,
spook me,
exactly.
but I'm just thinking that section of houses before you get to Huset's, it is pretty dark there. I mean, is that something where we could put lights up?
Well, they had, excuse me, they had an
DOT's
opportunity to put
looking at
lights
that
up
in their
about
corridor
15
study,
years
I
ago
think.
when
No.
the state redid Highway
bring it up.
11,
They
I
didn't
know,
come
but
back
it
with
would be part of
lights.
their project.
but the city didn't put them in.
At that time, I think it was up to the state to have to put them in. I'm not sure, but
I don't know.
So are you considered part of the city, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we're part of
Well,
the
I
city.
think, the whole street light thing, it's like, I don't have any kids in school.
Right.
But I pay taxes to put somebody else's kids in school. And so in my mind, the street light is, I don't have one right in front of my house either. But I'm lighting the whole town, and I think that is our theory. The storm drainage system, because we're over 10,000 people now, we have to have a much more sophisticated system. And I'm sorry that you're not on city water and sewer, but you are part of the city. And so that, in my mind, we all cover each other.
I know, but we didn't live there when we were annexed into the city limits.
Well, we're dealing with now.
we're
Yeah,
the second
right.
owners of the property.
I mean,
They had a
I
chance
just
to
think
opt
we
out
have
to
to
get out,
all,
so,
But why should we
cover
have
each
to pay
other.
for two? Pay
know.
the city for lights and then pay to have a light?
Well, I pay for lights in my yard. I mean, you don't have to have that light, do you?
Yeah, we do. Come
That's
out
your
to-
choice. That's your choice.
Well, yeah, but it's pitch dark.
Okay, but that's your,
That keeps the deer out of our property.
Yeah.
So let me just throw a hypothetical out there. What if you turned your light off, the place is gonna be so dark, it's already dark,
Yeah.
that's gonna force the city to put a light in. I hate to say it that way, but that's just the way I look at it right at this point in time. Any thoughts?
DOT's doing that corridor study on Highway 11 now. We can certainly talk to them about installation of streetlights out to Huset's, for instance, as part of that.
Because 15 years ago, as she was stating, none of us were probably here. Brian, you
Right.
weren't even the city administrator
Right.
then. But now, obviously, the city is growing. Do you guys, I mean, is that something we could do? I mean, that's something that citizens get, obviously, we get charged the street light fee, but putting it in, that's something the city would assume the
Correct.
cost, right?
Venture Gets DOT would require us to pay for those lights. And like I said, we could include that in the corridor study and then have them construct those lights when they do the Highway 11 project, when they redo it.
Here again, you're gonna run into another barnstorm on that because they're talking about redoing that road from Highway 11,
Park Avenue.
Park Ave, all the way up to Park Avenue again. So there you go, they're gonna tear everything up out there and move everything around again. So my thing is, why force us to start paying for something? Let's leave something the way it is. And then when they get this other project resolved, then cross the bridge when we get to it. That's just my feeling. So, but we're either gonna pay one or the other.
So, the stormwater thing, nobody has paid it until this year. Am I right?
Correct.
This is the first year anybody's paid the stormwater utility fee because it's something we just added because we capped a certain population. So the state requires us to do more with our stormwater and drainage. So we added a stormwater utility fee to help pay for that. So you're not the only ones who are paying this for the first time as far as the stormwater goes, right?
Yeah, but the only
Now-
time we have any extra water is when it rains, get a heavy rain, and then it goes down the creek.
Okay.
Because it's channeled, there's a big culvert that they put
But-
right down to
yep.
the creek.
You dig down 3 inches out
Okay.
to our place, you're gonna hit gravel.
okay, we're gonna get this wrapped up.
Right.
Go ahead.
But, so then, on the rest of Highway 11, do we own the streetlights on there? Like all the way out to the interstate?
yes.
All the way
Yes.
through the city of Brandon,
Yeah.
we own the streetlights?
We pay for their electric bill every month.
Okay. And why haven't there been more put on a stretch between, say, the railroad bridge and Huset's? Just because the DOT hasn't, or we haven't required it,
Haven't
or?
requested it.
Okay.
Could that streetlight there be transmitted into the city?
Not in their yard, no.
No. not in
No,
their yard.
it's right up by
It's
the
on private
house.
property.
Yeah.
I said, I made the statement earlier that that's probably 100 feet off of the highway.
Yeah.
Because it's the second light pole from the highway. The first one is the transformer, then it's the one that has the security light on, that's been there
Since 76.
since.
The streetlight fee is paid by every resident in town, whether you have a streetlight in there right away, right in front of their house or down the street. It's for the safety of the town, including city-owned lights and Excel Energy lights and stoplights
but
and welcome
Sioux
signs
Valley
and
Energy
sirens. It's for the whole entire town. Every residential property is treated the same for stormwater and for streetlights.
I'm afraid we can't just carve out one, in my mind, we just can't carve out one property because it's covering everybody in town. And so we can take this under advisement, but we do need to get going with our meeting on other topics. So I guess we'll put it on, I don't know, put it on the agenda for discussion and see what we can come up with.
Okay. When's the corridor study due to be done?
They said 2025.
Oh, gosh.
Out where we're at.
I think you people are
Okay.
pretty fortunate because I'm awful darn hard of hearing even with speakers, so what just bounces around in my head.
Thank you for coming. We appreciate it.
I am curious, no one else has reached out about this fee yet? Okay. But that is something I would,
That calls,
You've
for
had-
questions, but
okay, but I'm saying on this strip, because I would like to
There
see
has.
if, yeah, because part of me is like, it is really dark. I would like to see if there's a way that we can come to a compromise until we know we can get some streetlights out there. Do something. I know it's not gonna be right in front of their house, but at least if there's lighting up that stretchway, would go a long way.
Just to. Well, we'll work on it. Just let us work on it.
Just to clarify on the streetlights. Just to clarify on the streetlights along Split Rock the city owns. Those are not the ones that we rent from Sioux Valley Energy.
No, yeah.
So if you wanted to put those in, that's a pretty hefty charge at first.
Yeah, that's what I'm curious about. But I don't know, I just encourage all the council members, and I think we have, like, you drive that stretch, and you guys know what I'm talking about. It's very dark, and there is a lot of deer, and so I'm just surprised we haven't yet, and so I'm just curious if there's a way that we can look at the cost and what that would entail,
Good point.
to put those in.
I'm assuming that we probably have something similar elsewhere.
The one that comes to mind would be the lights on Aspen from the hockey rink out to Chestnut. Would be the last time that we installed lights that weren't in a core reconstruction project.
So let's circle.
Another area that we may want to look at, I think it's Italy, but it's from Chestnut out to Sunshine.
Yeah, those lights were installed, I think, in 2010, 2011, so there wasn't anything much past Chestnut at that point in time.
So I think that this
that-
discussion could come under the CIP when we review the CIP.
Yeah, because they're a little bit different. This one is all in city limits, where the one on Sunshine, that's still county jurisdiction. So we would have to work with the county on that. So it's not impossible, but there's other hoops to jump through for that one.
So you're saying between Chestnut and Sunshine and stuff?
Yep, that's county jurisdiction.
Okay, we can circle back on this. Kevin is waiting patiently.
Good evening, Kevin Smith, 521 East Switchgrass Trail. I'll keep my comments brief. I'm here representing the Water Conservation Committee, give you a brief update on 2021, some things for 2022, and just reminders that it's never too early to think about lawn watering restrictions. 2021 financially, again, thank you, Mayor and City Council, for supporting us in the Water Smarter program. We had a $15,000 budget. We expended about $12,000, a little over $12,000 of that for a number of rebates. About 136, I think was the total number, Christina, of rebates that we had for toilets, washing machines, rain barrels, and other irrigation items. So knowing that the program is really still in its infancy, or didn't have a rebate program until, I think, 2019, that each year we have added another item. Last year, as you recall, we added washing machines. So initially, the emphasis was on outdoor water use in the summer, still is a priority, but we've also moved indoors to the bathroom with stools and the laundry room with the washing machines. And this is really an extension of that. So we're requesting to include high-efficiency dishwashers and have a similar rebate as we do with washing machines, $125, up to $125. And that would provide another incentive in the kitchen. So bathrooms, laundry rooms, kitchens, and also a real emphasis is still outdoor water use in the summertime. 2021, we learned, as it got dry, and it got dry very early. And I think our first instance of going over the 1.6 million gallons per day was in maybe the first or second week in June. And we battled that, dry conditions and lawn watering all summer long. So we do have a number of public education opportunities beginning early this spring, and hopefully we can get some more attention from the local news media on the importance of understanding and adhering to the lawn watering restrictions. But for the foreseeable future, that knowing that we over double our water usage in the summertime is a challenge. The energy industry figured this out a long time ago with their load management programs. And if you look, let's say, Sioux Valley Energy and the listing and number of items that they have under their load management programs, that's kind of a model for us in water supply and water distribution and water use. So again, we really appreciate the opportunity to be part of this with our community, because it is very important, and I'll take any questions you have.
You put together a great graph last year that showed the water usage starting to spike at like almost in lifetime. I don't remember what organization I was sitting with that you presented that at, but do you still have those?
Yes, we do. And in fact, Raleigh just recently gave me the last, I think it was through September. So we look at it really May through September, which is kind of peak lawn watering, and we have the information, the flow data, and thank you for that prompt, Counselor. The city's website does have the daily flow data, so if anyone is interested on any given day, in the summertime, not now, how are we doing, so we can avoid going into advanced lawn watering restrictions like 1 day a week, which we did have to do last summer. That information's available, and we do keep that updated. It's interesting to look back on 2019 when it was cool and wet, and we didn't get close to 1.6 million gallons a day. 2020 was dry, 2021 was dry, and you can look at those graphs and just see the difference. And it's primarily lawn watering. Not that we don't want to see green lawns, but we also have to manage the water supply. So, we've got the financial incentives, things like the rebate program. There's the financial disincentives, which is the tiered water rates, that the more you use, the more you pay beyond a reasonable amount. And then there's the public education component, which again, the rest of the committee and I really do focus on with our public events, giving away rain barrels and things that, just kind of prompt people to remember the value of water and not to waste it.
Any questions for Kevin?
Just a couple comments or questions. When we went into the restrictions, how many complaints did we follow up on out in the field? Any idea? Yeah, citations, not even citations, because I don't think we actually issued, but maybe a handful of citations, but how many times did we get out and talk to people? And, because the few things that I've heard from residents is, oh, I forgot to get my sprinkler system reprogrammed, or I don't know how to reprogram it anymore. I mean, I'm assuming that that was most of the problems with people watering, or not necessarily, Raleigh?
I don't know, I've seen, I guess since 2017 when we implemented watering restrictions, I've pretty much handed out an average of 60 to 70 a year. Some of them have been repeat offenders. Some of them were out of town, they didn't know their irrigation was running. Yeah, I've heard, you know, I don't want to say an excuse, but I've heard every reason for them watering their yard when it's not supposed to be watering. So, I don't know, I get calls about it every time I hand it out, but.
I'm just wondering if there's another method of communication, maybe through our text messaging system to everybody, you know, be sure to change your water settings or something to that effect. I don't know, I just think if we can somehow or another communicate, I think we do a pretty decent job with that, but even more so, I think it'd be helpful. I know that's the few comments that I had from a few different people. Because I asked around, because it didn't seem like a lot of people were adhering to it that I thought would be normally. And that was usually the comment, oh, I got to get my sprinkler reprogrammed, or some reason.
Jack, the Water Conservation Committee has this whole calendar of events with posts and newspaper articles, et cetera, et cetera. So they're trying to work to get that word out, but people have to be receptive to it too. And so I think that is in the works. And this committee is all volunteers, and they do a terrific job. So.
You guys do an ad like I was talking about in the paper? Seems like maybe I saw one.
We've had ads, and Jill's been very gracious about timely news articles too. So, you know, combining things like announcing the new incentive program along with reminders continually, especially if it looks like it's going to be dry again this spring. That I think one thing we've learned as a committee over the last couple of years is public education is early often, and it's a journey, not a destination. So to your point, if there are other means, other opportunities to educate the public about these are the lawn watering restrictions, this is why we have them, because we don't want to go into 1 day a week lawn watering restrictions and how to adhere. So even, the incentive program of swapping out your irrigation controller to something that is easier to program for the odd even schedule. The city has said not just, well, these are the restrictions, but here's an incentive. If you have an old system that wasn't designed for the odd even system, you can replace it. And most irrigation installers, I think, are aware of our lawn watering restrictions and how to program timers if people can't do it themselves.
I just want to say, thank you, Kevin, and I know you guys are on the water committee, because it really has, like you said, it's more of a journey, right? Like, it takes a while, but the things that you guys have made me aware of too, and just even my family, and like, oh, we could do that, oh yeah, I think it's a great way, and even now we're teaching our kids, you guys have to send those flyers out, so I think it's wonderful. Do we have to make a motion for this rebate?
Yes.
Okay, I make a motion.
Say make an amendment to the Water and Smarter Incentive Program to include high-efficiency dishwashers effective.
What Christina said, effective immediately?
Sure.
Okay.
You want to wait that one?
We can do it now.
Because we can do it now.
We can do it now.
Just do March 1st, effective March 1st.
Effective March 1st.
And I'll second that. And I'll just comment, Jack, I appreciate that feedback, because that just gives me ideas to take back to our committee, because I think we can do a better job of talking a little bit deeper on the how to adhere, rather than just getting the word out, reminding people that the restrictions exist. We can creatively incorporate some of that how do you adhere to those restrictions? Maybe a little bit, something for us to kick around.
I do a lot of brainstorming, and I just got thinking, well, do we know anyone that's in the business that would be willing to provide services to the committee for a Saturday? And then we advertise that, hey, you know, if you need help programming, give us a call.
Everybody has their own person to install their system, so one person coming in would be difficult to do, because I don't want a contractor that I have hired.
Why would that be so difficult?
Because everybody has their own irrigation.
There's only 3 or 4 different.
Yeah, but if we hire person A to do it, and this person has person B, they're not gonna do it for free.
That was my suggestion. Maybe there is somebody that would.
We can ask the licensed irrigation installers if they would do it for free.
Okay, we've got a motion on the table. I think there's a viable
Join the committee.
committee member. We need more people. Okay, we've got a motion on the table to add to the rebate program. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Thank
Keep
you.
up the good work.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thanks, Kevin. All right. No old business. Moving on to committee reports, golf course.
We've got a proposed seasonal wage scale.
Oh, hold on, Brian, just a second. I'll recuse myself from both 1 and 2 since it seems that there is a child with my name on this page.
Anyway, based upon the current wage inflation that's occurring in the Sioux Falls area, you know, we've looked at what Sioux Falls is paying their seasonal help, primarily pool and parks. So this new wage scale that we're proposing for 2022 is based upon the wage scale that Sioux Falls is proposing. For instance, their lifeguards, I think they're starting them at $16 an hour. We're proposing 15. Their parks maintenance folks, I think, are at 16. 17. So we're $1 below what Sioux Falls is currently paying or proposing to pay for their seasonal employees.
You need a motion for us to approve this wage
Correct.
scale?
You know, based upon, and just to clarify, based upon, you know, the hours that were worked in those various departments with seasonal employees, we're looking at about $106,000 in additional cost to budgets this year.
I'll make the motion to approve the season, 2022 seasonal wages as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second to approve the increase in the seasonal wages. All in favor? Or aye?
Aye.
Sorry about that. I was supposed to ask for discussion. Okay, all right, okay. Okay, we got the work report from Parks and Rec.
We got
No?
seasonal employees at the golf course.
Oh, okay.
Although
Oh,
it
I
doesn't
thought
seem
that
like it
was all
today.
together. Okay.
They were gonna be opening soon,
Okay.
however, Andrews submitted a list for the seasonal help to date and their appropriate wages.
They say 40s next week, so. We'll see.
It wasn't supposed to be 0 this week.
I know, right? Burr. Okay, motion to approve, right?
Yep.
Second.
Okay, motion and second for the seasonal employees at the golf course. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Oh, boy. Okay. Now can I move to the Park and Rec work report?
Yep.
Okay. Got that. Volunteer fireman's report. Page 70, the fire contract. Where are we at on that?
Christina's called around and got some quotes for audits or reviews. They're listed there. Some CPAs don't provide those services, and others have a cost increase for what we've had done in the past. And that includes Coleman Berglund, although they don't do reviews anymore.
You had made a suggestion of having the books looked at by Christina.
Or just a suggestion that the city would require an audit or a review, and that would leave it up to the city whether we wanted to hire somebody to do it or have Christina do it or someone in our finance department do it.
Does that have to be like, we have to write that down somewhere, or what?
And I apologize, I didn't include that draft in this meeting packet.
We've had it before. Yeah.
But you had it before. So that would just be language that gives us a little authority to go in and review those expenditures or those policies by either an outside consultant or Christina.
Would we still do, where I think right now we split it, right? We're still the same thing?
We could add that language.
I mean, my thing is, this is a volunteer service, and I understand that we provide money, but they also provide a great service to our community, and I really want to work with them, not against them, and somehow come up with something that is fair, and I don't really feel like they spend a whole lot of money. And why, I mean, like, why would the books have to be done, like, I don't know, every year? Because maybe I'm wrong, but if something happens, wouldn't that, like, show up anyways, like, or no, or not necessarily?
Not necessarily. You know, that's. No, you know, you can read all kinds of stories about fraud being committed over a length of time without it being picked up, and it's not even picked up in audits sometimes until some court takes place. You know, there's the one that I refer to as the city clerk in Illinois that was absconding with 1/3 of their property tax revenues every year, went on for years, and was finally caught because she went on vacation, and somebody else stepped in and ran the books for a week and found this weird account. So it can happen. I don't want to say easily, but it's not uncommon. It's more common than it should be. Let's put it that way. We don't, you know, in my opinion, I don't think at this point in time we want to do an audit because, like we talked about before, in their capital equipment, primarily with their vehicles, they were informed by a previous accountant that they could get rid of that information, and they did. But when you do an audit, you look at those records, and they don't have those records. So there's always an audit finding if it's a full-blown audit. So I don't think, that's why we changed it from an audit requirement to a review. The review just comes in and looks at the expenditures and policies, makes sure everything is kosher, but it doesn't do the deep dive that an audit does.
Why don't you bring that back next time, and we can review it and see if that's the direction we want to go, or, because they're probably wondering too, where we're at on that.
So what you're saying is, using one of the new firms that's supposed to be last year.
No,
Christina.
Yeah, the language that was in the draft that I gave you a couple meetings ago leaves it very open-ended. Just says the city is allowed to audit or review the books at their discretion. So it doesn't say we're going to use a CPA or an outside firm or Christina. It just leaves it open.
So I'll just add, I visited with 2 different CPAs on this topic, and there's apparently 4 different levels of peer reviews that can happen, with the 4th and most cumbersome being the audit, which nobody wants to do because it's usually just being done as a formality because somebody's requiring it to be done. But both of the professionals that I spoke to said that there are absolutely ways to review the books without having to do a full audit. And one was a compilation, the other 2 are just more simple peer reviews, but one suggestion was, if not in-house through the city, you know, even a council member or 2 could sit on an annual review. You know, we do spot checks with the city, with a couple council members. I mean, we could be included in that for that matter.
Who's the financial person on the council?
I think.
Right now, the audit.
Dave is in charge of administration.
Who's doing
The ones that are doing audit right now, it's Tim and Barb.
Yeah.
I think there's other alternatives than audits.
And the firms that Christina talked to, some of them do compilations too, but a compilation to us is a waste of money because all it does is takes the fire department's numbers and puts them in a new spreadsheet. doesn't look at any policies, procedures, purchasing, doesn't pull any bills. That's the way it was explained to us. So we'd want some form of review.
Christina would review it. This is just what we're proposing, maybe. And then if for some reason she sees that that we need an audit, then that gets done. Is that what you're saying?
Good.
Otherwise, you would just review it every year, and if something arises, then you would, right, or no?
Could, I mean, that could be one.
We just don't know, okay.
It's fairly
Yeah, I
open-ended.
mean, it's pretty open-ended. You could,
It's just saying.
I could review it when the council feels there's a need to review it, or you could direct me to review it on an annual basis, or, I mean, it's open-ended right now on what you guys are comfortable with.
The draft language was at the city's discretion.
So I see the fire chief's back here. Can we just ask him his opinion? Is this something that would be acceptable to you, or can you share with us what your ultimate goal is? Yeah.
I think we want to make it really clear that we have no thought of anything malfeasance going on. That is not it at all. Yeah. Yeah, so we want to make that.
No, and to reinforce Brian's point, we don't have to go very far to see fire departments that were ruined. There's one in Lincoln County, not too far from Sioux Falls a few years ago. Thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars. So it happens.
Unfortunately, a lot of this fraud does occur in nonprofits because there's typically less oversight.
The Sioux Fire Fair had a whole bunch of money taken.
Mhm.
By a lady who was
Yep.
taking cash out of camping fees.
So Chief Dexter, would this be an acceptable compromise?
I can't speak for the board, but I think they would be open to that.
Okay.
I think at the discretion, like Brian and Christina are saying, we do our own internal audit every year. It's all the chief officers, which is the fire chief, 3 assistant chiefs, all 5 board members that are currently on the board, any board members that were on the previous board, so we could have up to 8 to 10 people, and 2 members of the general body. And we go through month by month, the checkbook is there, every receipt. Any questions we have, we're open to having somebody come sit in on that. I mean, we're not trying to hide anything either, we're just.
I can't imagine you have just an exuberant amount of expenditures either. I mean, there's
No, there's a
payroll.
few odd ones every now and then that pop up, as you can imagine, but for the most part, it's pretty
Right.
straightforward.
Okay.
And I would assume that most volunteer boards would want to be looked over just because it does protect them
Mhm.
from committing fraud.
Yep.
You need some sort of a motion.
No, I'll bring that in at the next council.
Thank you.
Just my one addition to that, I would say that we should do a peer review once a year.
An internal peer, like city or?
Christina.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, we will bring that back. All right, we've got a tax abatement from the county. If someone would make a motion for that.
Motion to approve. Second.
Motion and a second to approve the tax abatement recommended by the county. All in favor? It's getting weaker and weaker. Everybody's getting tired. Okay. Hey, good news. We got a new person coming on board.
We do, interview committee consisting of myself, Chuck Parsons, Dave Cull, and Mayor Heinitz interviewed 3 finalists for the development director position. Recommendation was to offer it to Patrick Andrews. He is currently a regional planner at CCOG, has been there for 6 years, has done our work for planning and zoning for 6 years, recommending that he be placed on line 20, step 4 at a rate of $35.17 an hour.
I would just like to say that we have worked with Patrick quite a bit on P&Z, and he is very knowledgeable on planning and zoning issues. And it turns out he's also knowledgeable on economic development issues because he's had to work with it at CCOG, so he's a great candidate for this.
Also an attorney. That could kind of scare me off, but.
He's not licensed here in South
Okay, okay, we're safe then. Okay. No offense, Lisa. Okay. All in favor then? Opposed? Okay, we got a new person. He's a good guy. All right, streets, work report. We got good bids, Tammy. Tell us about that.
Yep, Core Phase 2A did bid out. Our engineer's estimate was at 4.3 million, and our lowest bidder was 3.9. So really good bids. The lowest bidder was Sukup Construction. They're the ones that did the first phase, and they did a really good job there. So I would recommend that we move forward with Sukup Construction.
Motion to approve Sukup.
Second.
Any discussion? Motion,
Right, whenever the weather allows.
all in favor of that motion to accept the bid?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. Then we have some slurry seal bids.
Slurry seal, this is bid out with the City of Sioux Falls project. This year, our slurry seal areas would be the Bluffs Edition, Eagle Creek Edition, and Sioux Heights Edition. We do have a stipulation in there that it has to be completed by August 1st, and our cost of the project would be $187,604.95.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion and second to approve the slurry seal bid. Any discussion down there, gentlemen?
What are we doing this year again? I'm sorry.
The Bluffs Edition,
Yep.
Eagle Creek Edition, and
Yep.
then Sioux Heights Edition.
And remind me where Sioux Heights is,
It is just west of Sioux Boulevard, kind of back behind Casey's.
behind Casey's, up to what street?
Bird, yeah, in that area. It does not go all the way down to Ironwood, no. Parkview.
Stuff. Okay, awesome.
Okay.
It's not.
So basically, it's from the church, south to, not quite Parkview, west of
Okay. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Anything else for the good of the cause? Entertain a motion, oh, I guess I can just call it. Somebody make a motion to adjourn.
We have this discussion a lot, but technically, by Roberts, isn't a motion to approve, isn't that sufficient to, motion to just, adjourn?
Typically,